Good morning, noon, or night, wherever and whenever you're listening to The Shift. This is episode 28, and I am your host, Doug McKenty. It's being recorded on the 26th of February, 2018. If you like what you're hearing, please think about becoming a patron. That's patreon.com/The Shift. Get more info at my Facebook page, The Shift with Doug McKenty. Join the conversation on Twitter at DMcKenty, or my website is theshiftnow.com for archives and other information. My guest on the show today is author, journalist, and editor Teodrose Fikre. He has written 2 books, a collection of poetry entitled Serendipity's Trace, as well as Soul to Soil, a compilation of observations and prose designed to synthesize the binary nature of existence. More recently, Teodrose works as the founder, editor, and principal writer at the Guion Journal, an online independent media source which seeks to revolutionize the way media is disseminated and consumed by offering an alternative paradigm to the two-party ideology offered by the corporate state media. As a first-generation immigrant from Ethiopia, he brings a uniquely African perception to his work, as well as the ability to temper hard-nosed, critical anti-establishment journalism with an emotional, artistic aspect that brings deeper meaning and depth to the revolution. Teodrose brings a variety of life experience to his work, once a successful defense contractor at Booz Allen Hamilton, whose ideas made their way into Obama's 2008 victory speech. He later found himself disillusioned to the point of homelessness, learning firsthand the experience of the most alienated amongst us. Stay tuned to find out more about this remarkable story and the ideas behind the revolution happening at the Guion Journal. Thanks for agreeing to be on the show, and thanks, Teodrose, for helping to make the shift.
Thank you so much, Doug. I was kind of listening to you. I was like, oh, that's me.
Yeah, right on. I mean, I've been impressed with your work. I've probably been reading what you've been putting out over Facebook, at least for 6 or 8 months now, and I was really happy actually to hear an African-American perspective, especially around the time of the whole Trump racism, right, Charlottesville era about white privilege and such. You had a kind of a unique perception that I really resonated with as a white man, and so I really appreciated that work, and that's what got me kind of hooked. But then I got into the rest of your stuff as well, and it's just nice to see more good independent media being put out there. I meant to ask you before, did I get all the pronunciations right? Is that how do you say your name?
No,
okay.
It's actually Fikre, but okay. Trust me, I've been called a lot of things in life.
Yeah, right.
This is the least of the least among them, so I'll take it. But no, it's Teodrose Fikre. And by the way, let me just say at the outset, there was a time, so I try not to be too judgmental towards people that do dabble in this paradigm of identity politics, and this outrushes them, because I was there too, right? So when I was in 2008, when I was in fact busting my ass for the Obama campaign, I saw everything through the prism of left, right, black and white. I used to go around saying white privilege and making fun of conservatives. And only thinking that injustice came my way and not seeing the total picture. And so hardship has a way of crystallizing things and showing you, if you choose anyways, to see the real nature of injustice. So I don't see you as a white man, and I don't see me as a black man. I see you as a human being. These labels are just they're artificial constructs. Before they were imposed upon humanity to divide us, we didn't call each other these names. They were imposed upon us by people that saw a profit motive in us being divided. And so I don't feed into that anymore. I reject it out of hand, and I see all of us as fellow human beings. That's not to say that I disavow cultures. I love different cultures that we all bring to the table, right? So I love my Ethiopian culture, for example. And I don't know what quite to call it yet, because I don't really like the word African anymore for a lot of reasons. But I love the African American culture, and the Irish culture and the Japanese culture. We all have different beauties within us. Right. So it's not I'm not preaching conformity. It's I'm just disavowing differences as a cudgel, and seeing the main thing that I see first is what we have in common, and within those commonalities, accepting our differences. So, it took hardship for me to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I just so appreciated it because I think you're right, hitting the nail right on the head with this divide and conquer tactic that we're getting so much from the mainstream media and from the upper classes that are able to use this separation, trying to get white to fight black or male to fight female or left to fight right, instead of, and you talk about this, I know a lot in your work, is unifying. I mean, we can be from different cultures and different backgrounds, but unify under the cause of liberating ourselves from, what's really going on. And so a lot of this, I can't agree with you more, is to take our eye off the ball. Whatever community or whatever cultural background we have, we're all under the thumb of the man right now. That's how I look at it.
By the way, because look, these things, people at the very top, there's no difference between black or white, women or men. So, I disavow, for example, people that say, Jews do this. No, there's Christians that do this as well.
Sure.
There's Buddhists that do this as well. So to me, there's, I don't know where, I wrote in the past, I don't know where evil ends and compliance begins. But I do know there's evil. I do know there's people that actively do this. They actively push, injustices. They actively push suffering upon the planet, and the rest of us react. And unfortunately, we react by fighting each other, by fighting fellow victims, instead of saying, you know what, we're all getting, walloped by this. And that's the brilliance of the quote unquote system. I'm looking at that red, what do you call it? The drape that you have behind you. And so it's kind of like trying to figure out what's behind, trying to figure out who's in charge. Is like trying to figure out who is behind the curtain. We'll never know. For me, like the only way I could, isolate who's behind that red curtain is to say who is making money from this, right? So when I blame, for example, Democrats or Republicans, I don't blame Trump voters. They're not making money from that. I blame people that are specifically making money and profiting from injustice. They're the ones that are doing this. The rest of us, I don't even care if you're making $400,000 a year, unless you're actively like getting fortunes. Trump and Hillary, Obama and Pence. These people that are making money. And by the way, they're just pawns in the system too. There's people that really beyond that, Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and the billionaires that we've never even heard of. Old money in Europe. These people that are actively making profits, they're the ones that's behind the curtains. We'll never see them. So stop bashing each other and unite. And so that's what I'm hoping that to accomplish through my writing and through the Guion cast and through having conversations like this with you, fellow independent media outlets and fellow independent journalists.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it because it just, the mainstream media narrative gets so divisive, and that's exactly according to plan. And we all need to be getting together and uniting, at least under the common flag of that we all have the right to make choices for ourselves and have independence within our own communities.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we don't do that, then they're going to win every time.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you in the intro, I was like listening to, I was like, well, that's me. But no, the idea of revolutionizing media is not really revolutionary. It's actually the fundamentals of media, which is the reason that media is broken right now is because the incentive structure, the corporate business model depends, when I was pursuing my MBA, they taught us about always have your base demographics when marketing. So identify your demographics and then drive everything through that demographic, right? So this is what corporate media does. Fox News, their base demographic is older quote unquote white men, conservative leaning, old fashioned, whatever. So that between 45 to 55. So that's who they identify with, and that's who they drive their messages to. And then MSNBC. It's more maybe inner city, single woman or politically left leaning. So they all go through and slice and dice America into grievance groups for the sake of marketing their message and for the sake of maximizing their profits. So even though I'm pretty sure there might be decent human beings that work in corporate media, the system is perverted because the system pays primary attention to profit motive above and beyond the main precepts of journalism, which is supposed to be speaking truth to power. So the revolutionizing I'm talking about is to go back to it, to decouple media from corporatism and to have it be based within the community. So I'm hoping, and so when you said in the intro about your Patreon page and getting the viewers and audience to be the patrons, to be the supporters of independent media, that is the only way to go. Because when the supporting base is millions of people, right, as opposed to millions of dollars from one person, then we're not as beholden to the agendas of millions of people. At that point, we could actually speak truth to power. But when one person is sending a paycheck of $1 million or more, then all of a sudden that one person has veto power. So it's completely bastardized the fourth estate, and they've become shills and mouthpieces, and there's no truth to be had in corporate media at all. They're peddling this nonsense about Russia on purpose, and they keep antagonizing us and whispering to our demons. It's very dangerous. And so I'm hoping that we step into the breach and take over where the mainstream media has been derelict in their duty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been shocked lately. I've really been focusing on how the mainstream media has been able to set the narrative about whatever it is that we're talking about, be it race or class or foreign policy. You're talking about Russia or what's going on in Syria, all of these things. And then you look at the alternative media, which is fortunately starting to get large enough that you're starting to be able to see some cohesive patterns.
Right.
And it's pretty amazing that actually the alternative media, I mean, by and large, sees through the Russian fiction.
Right.
By and large, they understand that what's going on in Syria is basically American imperialism.
Right.
Like there's no rational justification for what's happening there. This is not a civil war. This is not evil Assad. And so it's, how can all of the independent media, which is starting to speak in this cohesive voice, be so antithetical to the corporate media, except for what you're talking about, which is the millions of dollars, the commercials that are, getting paid.
Right.
And now I'm looking at it, honestly, it's right in your face. They're taking commercial money. I mean, that's a conflict of interest. Of course, they're not telling you the truth about the banks or the pharmaceutical companies or, the military industrial complex, because that's where they get their money.
Right. Yeah. It's, the crazy thing is, I just wrote this earlier on Twitter, by the way, but usually the scale and the scope of the bogeyman is dependent on what type of threat the establishment feels, right? So the more there's a threat to the status quo, the more the bigger the bogeyman becomes. So, 9/11 happened, the bogeyman became the jihadists, right? And so at that point, because the perceived threat before was, well, we had to make sure that we know what every American is thinking, right? I mean, this is the fact that the Patriot Act is targeting us as much as it's targeting outside is ridiculous. I can't believe we accept this as a cost of being Americans, except we have. So back then, that was the scale of the bogeyman was, jihadists and caves. Now, I'm assuming that the threat that the status quo feels is another 2008 happening. And if that really happens, it's going to unravel. And so what better way to deal with this threat but than by creating the ultimate bogeyman, which is Russia.
Right.
So we're talking about nuclear war. And to just casually, I see there's I forgot his first name, Nadler, Jerry Nadler, I think he is. He actually said that what Russia did was worse than 9/11 and that there was a pretext to war. I saw the interview. I said, wow, this guy is laying down the pretext for a war that could end all of humanity. And this is the outrageous news of. So there's two reasons. One is because there's a profit motive in this type of sensationalism. And I think the other part of it is because the people that are paying them to put on commercials, I really think that they feel some type of a threat from a cohesive voice. And so the bigger the threat becomes of us actually at some point unifying as one, people saying no more of this nonsense and reclaiming our government. And I'm not saying this from a Tea Party perspective or from a Black Lives Matter, but I'm from a human American perspective. It is in our vital interest to unite as one, disavow, put aside our differences, and say, okay, we demand a better government. And we can't do that as long as we're just focusing on individual grievances. And you see where that's getting us, and it's very dangerous times. And sometimes it's better not to even think about the repercussions. But I don't know. I feel like independent media is the only thing that kind of stands in between this level of complete tyranny, and having a modicum of freedom. And so, by the way, let me just say this: I come from Ethiopia. I was born in '74. The same year that the Marxists took over and they deposed the king of Ethiopia back then. Up until then, Ethiopia existed for more than 3,000 years intact. Yeah, we've had our ups and downs. We've had our periods of setbacks, and we've had our periods of mourning, but we survived intact for 3,000 years. In fact, it was up until that point the longest running empire in the history of the world. And then the Marxists took over. They perpetuated a red terror throughout the whole country. 200,000 people perished, and what we thought would never be possible happened within a flash. So tyranny, when people say tyranny, what we're seeing right now might not be tyranny on the scale of Ethiopia, but it never comes at one fell swoop. It just nibbles and nibbles and nibbles until one day you wake up, you're like, where's my country? And this is what happened in Germany too. I'm pretty sure Germans never thought that Hitler would rise, except he did, because these things happen in nibbles and nibbles until all of a sudden they take a big chunk. So it's in our interest to kind of pay attention to these things and stop paying for, falling for the BS of corporate media.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if this whole Russia thing that they're pushing isn't because the threat of the alternative media. It seemed to, like, something very bizarre has happened with the Trump campaign, where Trump almost started to court at least the conservative edge of the alternative media. He was on Alex Jones's show, and some of the rhetoric on the campaign seemed, I mean, he was talking about, it was almost, he was an anti-war candidate. Of course, he hasn't done any of that when he actually gets in office. But you're seeing that in this presidential campaign, they had to acknowledge the existence of the alternative media. And then as soon as Trump gets elected, suddenly this huge Russia thing starts happening, and, all of the alternative media sites, the bigger alternative media sites, have been labeled Russia propaganda.
Right.
It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I know. If people are like, you're Russian, I'm like, nah, I'm actually Ethiopian, but, And Russia's actually, Russia was part of the reason I came to America, because the Marxists took over. But, who has time for facts? But let me just say this. The thing about Trump, though, all right, so there was always a test to see whether or not he was really anti-globalist, right? What would he do with the Federal Reserve? What would he do with the various policies? By the way, the biggest Wall Street toady to me has been Obama, and I'm not saying this because I feel some type of a betrayal as a person that was so in the back for Obama, and then I realized, oh my God, he's the same shit. Excuse my language.
Yeah, right. No, I hear you.
So I'm not just saying that from that line of thinking. But then if Trump really was changed, he would have done the complete opposite. Not of rhetoric, forget rhetoric. Pay attention to the policies. And that's our problem as Americans. We keep focusing on rhetoric and politics. Pay attention to what they're doing in D.C. and the policies they're passing. So who does Trump implement at the Federal Reserve? Powell, Chairman Powell. Powell, who in the 1990s was, he left just in time before the stuff hit the fan at Bankers Trust. Bankers Trust was defrauding their customers in the same way. They were 2008 before 2008. So this man, who a multinational banker, who a banking shyster, excuse my language, but he is what he is now put into the Federal Reserve amongst other bankers, amongst other. So the Federal Reserve is not even a governmental entity; it's a private club for bankers. So if Trump was really an anti-globalist, he would have dismantled the Federal Reserve. Instead, he puts in a capo of the banking mafia to head the banking mafia. So this is everything at that point. Because, and by the way, TPP, the same thing that he said he was against, they're talking about bringing that back up. So it's just BS.
Right.
So what the system deviously does is it takes a temperature of the public mood at all times, right? So in 2008, when everything was going to collapse, the temperature of the public mood was, well, we needed a radical change. What more radical change can we get than electing the first African American president?
Yeah.
So that BS was foisted upon us. They gave us a dream, and we fell for it. And I know Trump supporters going, "Oh, never fell for that." Except you fell for Trump. So whatever.
Yeah. Well, I just had my last guest. We were talking a little bit about Trump, and he said, if the globalists didn't want Trump, then the media would have treated him like Bernie Sanders, or they would have treated him like Ron Paul, which they wouldn't have mentioned him at all. Instead, they were forcing him down our throats. They were putting Trump. Everything was Trump, even if it was bad press. They gave him like $1 billion worth of free coverage.
Right.
If they didn't want him,
Right. Not only that. I mean, I didn't make it. I guess so. Look, if there's this thing that I've noticed about our government, right? There's a cyclical change. So if you look back throughout just the past 30, 40 years, right? There's one person that's in power. Then 8 years, usually 8 years later, you have somebody that's complete antithetic, like complete opposite of that person. So let's go back to Bush. An elder Bush, quote unquote conservative, been with his wife for a long time,
Right.
And then who do we have? Slick Willie, right? So we get Bill Clinton, younger, philanderer, slick talking, where Bush was cold and undetached. Bill Clinton was feeling and warm and feel my pain, America, all that BS, right?
Yeah.
So after 8 years of that prick, excuse me, after 8 years of him, then who do we get? We get somebody the complete opposite. Back to cyclical change. We get another Bush that is not slick talking at all. Right. He mangles the language. So a complete opposite, right? 8 years of Bush, who do we get? The complete opposite of Bush. Obama, eloquent, cool, calm, collected, the anti-Bush. After 8 years of Obama, who do we get? Trump. It's like somebody, it's not conspiratorial to think of these things. If you're planning, if you're the head of a town, if you're a mayor, and you want that town to be continuously in the blind, you could implement various, people at various entities to make sure that the agenda is always to breed a sense of agitation within just that small set of communities. So that if you imagine if you have trillions, if you're a central banker, you have access to trillions in wealth, and you're able to make people do whatever you want, and then you can select Trump. You can select these various personalities, and we so focus on personalities that we're not seeing the underlying policies never change.
Right. Well, what's even more amazing, like you describe, every 8 years we're flip-flopping back and forth from two totally different perspectives, and the Congress is doing the same thing. The people are electing, we'll elect all Republicans. Oh my God, these guys are idiots. Let's elect all Democrats. Oh my God, they're not doing anything. But you can draw a straight line in terms of the globalist policies. The globalist policies are being implemented by Bush, then Clinton, then Bush, then Obama, now Trump. They're all doing the same thing. It's
same thing.
It's
never
outrageous.
Changes. Yeah, and to me, look, I wrote something a while ago about I don't know. I wrote this this is not really a satire. It was just more like, what if? because I was thinking back to the War of 1812. Like, British came into America, burned down the White House. Darling Madison had to save face for the White House. And I was like, how's the war not over at that point? If you're burning down the White House, how is the war not over at that? When I was like, what did the British cunningly actually did win and made us just feel like we won? Now I write that within, like, probably taking artistic license to kind of, but not. The more I think about it, though, it's not really Wall Street that's the head of the financial district of the world. It's still London. So you have to go back and connect the dots. Who controls the capital? Whoever controls capital controls nations' capitals. Mm-hmm. So America doesn't really have sovereignty. Our politicians are beholden to whoever has money. Every 2 years they have these big meetings in either in Europe at Davos. They have them in Seattle a lot, and you see a lot of the anti-globalists come out at that time. Mm-hmm. And then these leaders go hand in hand. They're told what to do. So it's the common glue to all this is the fact that we've been spun into a world of central banks. And so if we don't find a way to decentralize power, then it's going to get worse. And this, they said it a long time ago. The New World Order, they have it on the dollar bill. NWO is on the back of it, Nova Secular. And sure enough, that's what they're doing, and it's disheartening. Unless we wake up to it, these type of things are going to get worse, not better.
Yeah, I mean, you talk a lot in your work, and I think this is another. I mean, not only I think is it a big step for people to take when they start to understand that everything's tied together with the central banks and how the central banks work, but when it comes to foreign policy, and because like your recent article about Africa, you really recognize that colonialism hasn't ended. Right. That this is still. I mean, like you were talking about. I mean, I think. Frankly, maybe not politically, but economically, the British Commonwealth is still alive and kicking. The Queen is making money off of our, resources in the United States and Canada. And I mean, because they're these same transnational corporations have been working for her ever since they took over they created the colonies in the first place.
Yeah, I believe she's the wealthiest person in the world. It's not Jeff Bezos, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos has $100 billion. He can't touch the Queen of England's money. There's certain people that will never know how much money they have. The Rothschilds will never know how much money they have because they own all the money, right?
Yeah, right.
When you own the money, every money in the world is yours if you're able to manipulate the currencies. So I don't know. Like, it's just sometimes I feel like, is it even worth it to just talk about these things? Because unless there's a big catalyst, and usually these big catalysts that take place are usually tragic. And so I'm like, not even 1929, the crash of 1929, that should have been the big catalyst that severed the control that these tycoons have over America, the J.P. Morgans and the Carnegies and the Rockefellers. Except they got their way. FDR came in saying he's going to change America, just like Obama did.
Yeah.
God, man. And then he gave a speech. By the way, he gave a speech to the Wall Street. FDR did, and said, "I'm the guy. I'm the that's standing between you and the pitchforks." And then Obama, 80 years later, said the same exact.
Yeah. Right. Oh.
Exact thing. But I don't know. I guess what I hope is this. What I write about, it's a hope that we wake up to these things, because they seem very ingenious, but they're not. It's just they're very. I think it was the movie Usual Suspects. Kaiser Soze said the devil, the greatest trick that the devil ever committed was convincing the world he doesn't exist. Right. So the greatest trick that they're doing is convincing us that these things don't exist. And they're hiding in plain sight. And I'm talking about the way that they're manipulating us to fight each other, the way that they're using identity politics. And so if you pause as he's doing the things that he's doing, if you reflect upon it, then you realize that they're just using us. And so stop being used.
Yeah, I mean, people just, I don't even know what it's going to take. They've got to kind of wake up. I think the biggest thing, and that's why, I like to interview people like yourself and other independent journalists, because, this is the only way to get the word out. Right. And we've got to start convincing people to stop listening to this mainstream media. It really is, it's like poisoning people's minds, and then they can't think clearly, and they don't understand just how badly they're being taken advantage of. And the other thing is that we're not allowed to have conversations about real solutions.
Right.
The mainstream media is it's like creating this false reality, and then it's creating these false problems and false solutions, and we're all talking about all of this, nonsense that's going to get us nowhere. And only in the alternative media are we actually sitting down and saying, hey, because there are solutions out there. Right. We can figure it out if we put our heads together. Right. It doesn't have to be like this. People should be rich. Like you're talking about these people who are so rich that we'll never even know how rich they are. Let's get that money back from those people, and then we'll all be fine. We don't have to live paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're right. And by the way, there was something that you said just a few seconds ago. I was about to touch upon, but my mind just blanked out on me. But there's the sad thing is that this system of capitalism. By the way, me saying this, me speaking out against capitalism, does not make me a communist.
Yeah,
and we've been so trained to think left, right, or like through binaries. It's like 1 and 0. We're not communists. We can actually think beyond two options, But the system of capitalism requires scarcity, scarcity to be created. So there's companies like De Beers that they house vaults of so much diamond throughout the world. So at any point, if they feel like there's a competition coming, they flood the markets with diamonds and drive people out of business, and then stifle the amount of inventory of diamonds to drive the price of diamonds back up again. And companies do this everywhere, and so poverty at that point becomes an intentional creation. It's not an accident. These people that go around like the Clinton Global Initiative and Gates, then they're complete. They create the problem, like you said, and then on the back end, they try to pretend like they're the saviors. They're the devils and the saviors at the same time. Except they're the devils because they're the ones creating this. Somebody, if I come up to you and I kneecap you, and I give you a crutch, should not get a Nobel Peace Prize for that.
Yeah,
right. Except that's what's going on. A bunch of philanthropists are kneecapping people and then giving crutches and saying, "Oh, look at," and then they get rewarded.
Right.
So, and I think to depend on corporate media to speak these truths is impossible because they're getting paid by these very people that they're supposed to be speaking against. So the onus is on people that's not beholden to corporatism, people like us, and so. We will never be like the size of the Washington Post and the CNN. But what we could do, though, is by working together. There's a saying in Ethiopia that 1,000 spiders could tie up a lion. If 1,000 independent voices can match the scope and scale of the Washington Post, we just have to figure out a way to link our voices together. So that's why I'm gladly doing this interview.
Yeah, I absolutely love it, man. I think this is where it's at. It's so 100% true. People starting to wake up to what's really happening, and then all of us have to work together to start spreading the word out there, and then we can. What you're talking about, it reminds me, I'm reminded of the idea of too big to fail. That's what this government corporate collusion is really doing. It's creating these businesses that are so big. If it wasn't for the government that gave hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military contracts to these corporations, then those corporations get so big that they can do exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Whatever industry they're in, they can just flood the market. They can lose a couple $1 million for a few weeks, drive all the little guys out of business, and then all of a sudden the price shoots way up, and they've created, like you're talking about, this artificial scarcity. I just heard, I think Coke and Nestle are angling for like the second largest reservoir in the world in South America right
Brazil,
now, because they're actually making water scarce so that they can, it's like, what's next? Air? How are they going to do that with oxygen? They're working on it.
Yeah, we keep this up. It's going to be air sponsored by Sprite or some BS like that, there's a documentary that I saw where Toyota, I believe it was Toyota, they were doing studies, like the break-even point, right? So, like, how many faulty brakes can they abide in terms of how many lawsuits versus their profit margin, and what's the break-even point? And anything up to that point, they're able to say, okay, we could let 10% of the 5% of the cars, 2% of the cars have faulty brakes, and all these things. So, in other words, they're intentionally committing some people to their death in order to maximize their profit.
Right.
And this is the perverse nature. I really believe it's corporations. Corporations are the enemy of humanity.
Absolutely.
Because as long as the incentive structure is profit above people, then you have a company like Coke that's trying to monopolize people's water sources. You have, companies like Boeing and Northrop Grumman that are, lobbying for more wars and destroying nations like Syria and Libya, all to keep perpetuating their profits. And we pay for it too in America, because if you go out to your nearest city, I've never seen so much homelessness in my life, ever. I'm not just saying that because I was homeless for a while. I've never seen it. Like, I was driving through McLean recently. McLean in Virginia is like the Malibu of Virginia. It's filthy paid, and that's where all the so I used to work in McLean actually too. The irony of it all. That's where all the defense consulting companies are located. Tyson's Corner. There's more money there than you're able to count. But in that same area, I started seeing homeless people. Homelessness is pervasive in McLean. It's one thing to see it in D.C., and I'm not saying that we should accept it in D.C., but to see it in McLean is like a stark reminder. This country is becoming a nation, two nations. One reserved. It's like one nation of Switzerland for the rich, and another nation of, I don't want to insult another country, but what I'm saying?
Or you've got Greece or these countries that are definitely on the bottom of the European.
There's more that suffer. Right, by the way, I was back in the day, I used to say like Somalia, and I'm not saying that to diminish Somalia, but Somalia is at the bottom end of the toothpaste tube, right? We're all going to get there because the system depends on squeezing from the bottom up. So the new normal is going to be Mogadishu for America too. So just be careful about these things, because what happens overseas is going to come right here too.
Yeah, that's really something to think about, actually. I mean, there's no question about it. And certainly in my lifetime, we've just been watching it happen. The greater the separation of, and you have to either buy into the system, get the corporate job, get the education they want, think like they're telling you to think, work for them, and then they give you a big enough piece of the pie that at least you can afford, a nice house and some cars and maybe send your kid to college. But if you don't want to get the corporate job, and you don't want to toe their line, well, you're living paycheck to paycheck if you're lucky,
And by the way, even the corporate job, I worked for 8 years, close to 8 years at Booz Allen Hamilton, and before that I was at Sprint on the government systems division side. So 16 years, effectively close to 16 years. After 2000, every year I was scared I was going to lose my job. There is I don't care what type of job you have in corporate America. All of us feel the heat of well, what if I lose my job, right? Because, and by the way, part of it too, when a big shot comes in to your corporate cubicle and says, we need to get rid of these inefficiencies, they're talking about you.
Yeah.
Inefficiency. Because the inefficiency means we need more, or the opposite of that. We need to increase productivity. That means they're going to let go of somebody and make you do more work. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so this is, again, the pervasive incentive structure of maximizing profits. If a company, if I'm a private owner, right, and I'm making 20%, I'm happy with that. 20% profit is actually really good. If I'm a corporation, 20% today, I better make 21% tomorrow, right? The incentive structure is to keep making more money. There's no happiness because shareholders demand more and more money. It's greed. It's institutionalized greed, and it's destroying the planet. Corporations are the enemy of humanity. And so if we don't get rid of somehow, I'm not saying through government will dictate, but through individual decisions that we make as consumers, stop, it doesn't have to be cold turkey, by the way. Instead of going to Starbucks, if you go to Starbucks 10 times a week, go 5 times a week to a small coffee shop and starve the beast that way. But by doing it incrementally, that means as corporations start to, if they ever, this is pie in the sky thinking, but if corporations start to fail, small businesses will start. That is the essence of what capitalism is supposed to be about. As businesses fail, the other ones are supposed to come in and fill the vacuum. Fill the vacuum with small businesses. If not, that noose is around our necks.
Yeah, I did an interview a few months back with this guy Paul Cienfuegos, who runs this website communityrights.us, and it's about the community rights movement trying to get local communities to pass laws, like on the city level,
right,
to say, we have the right to our resources here, and corporations and the federal government can't come in here and take our stuff, But he has this whole thing about the history of corporations. And of course, as you can imagine, it's completely tied into the old European aristocracy. The first corporations were about trading between kings. So it's this whole monarchy, the East India Company. It's the old monarchy that we fought a revolution against to get out from under the boot of of the East India Company and these other corporations sponsored by the monarchies, and yet somehow we live under this corporate system, which the lineage goes right back to that,
So there might be something to this 1812 theory of mine.
I think there is. I actually really do. I think that, there were some revolutions, but, the thing about it is this old European money, this colonial money, they're just smart. They've been doing this for 2,000 years,
Yeah.
And so,
by the way, so you said earlier about how, about colonialism never went. It didn't go away, right?
Yeah.
It just became smarter about it. So in the 1800s, it was, like I said, through sheer force, guns, boots on, quote unquote, boots on the ground, and you just terrorize people into submission. Then they realized in the age of information, this is not sustainable. People are not going to abide, 100,000 people being killed and driven into submission. So they said, for people to do this. So we'll prop up one tribe. We'll continuously destabilize nations, and then tell the tribe that's in power, you either give us your money or the next tribe will come into power, right? Mm-hmm. So colonialism became about extortion and destabilization. That's how they're doing it right now in Africa. They're doing the same thing to us. And by the way, they did it to Britain too. The people in England said, we don't want to be a part of Brexit anymore. Of the EU, and they voted for Brexit. Immediately, they kneecapped their economy, and the British pound plummeted.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so they're still negotiating. The people voted, and they're still having good. It's unbelievable. I can't.
Right. Well, that gets back to that article that you wrote about democracy, the farce of representative democracy. The ballot is the bullet. I mean, it's like we're voting, but what's changing? What's going on? Everybody shows up at the Democratic primary and votes for Bernie Sanders, but there's no Bernie going on. I mean,
it's almost spiritual. I don't like to talk, like inject my faith into these things because I just like to keep that to myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it reminds me of people that used to go around. The Jews like, oh, we want a leader, we want a leader. Like, be careful. And then they got
Yeah.
Saul, you know.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
And so democracy in this way has become our egos. Instead of voting, not even voting, instead of having leaders that will serve us, they give us this pretend control, and our egos is driven by ideology and viewing politics as a sport. So as long as our team is in power, we say nothing, even though we get stepped on. And then our team loses, and then we want change. We want. I can't understand how something. By the way, I can't understand because I fell for it too. I wasn't
Right.
part of it. If I told you what I did in 2008 for the Obama campaign in terms of the sheer amount of energy I expended, I went to, I think final count was like 16 states.
Wow.
On my own money. I was not even a staffer. That's one thing if I was getting paid. As a volunteer, I went to 16 states. I was part of Ethiopians for Obama, Omegas for Obama, Veterans for Obama, Muslims for Obama, Latinos for Obama. I was writing stuff behind the scenes. When Latinos for Obama wanted something, I would do it. When it was never ending. I drove myself into complete depression and anxiety. By the time September came around, I couldn't even breathe. Like I felt like my life was about to crumble because I left everything aside to focus on getting the first black president elected.
Yeah, yeah.
To the point where I was invited to the inauguration, didn't go. I was like literally, I was on the couch, just depressed and spent, exhausted, physically, mentally, spiritually. For what? For what? To get a man that came in and gave away $15 trillion to Wall Street and gave the middle finger to the same people that voted for him, to the same people that supported him. He used the pains of African Americans to get himself elected and didn't do anything for neither African Americans or anybody else. This is the biggest fraud I've ever seen in my life, what he did. And, I hope history judges him accordingly because con artist. That's all I can say, seriously. And I get passionate about these things. He's no different than anybody else. He's no different than Bush. He's no different than Clinton. But still, there's a special type of malice in taking the pains of people and using it to prop yourself up. So,
right. Well, let's get into a little bit since you kind of started talking about the story. I did want to hear more about your personal story and why and how you made that transition. I mean, what was it like? What were you doing working for Booz Allen Hamilton? And then how did that happen? What woke you up to the lunacy of it all, and now you're walking this totally different path. I mean, you went all the way down, you were literally homeless for a couple of years just to have that experience, like I said in the intro, I think. And then when I read the stuff that you're putting out now, when you mention it, you talk about how good it was to have that experience because it brought in some wisdom and some understanding that you wouldn't have if you were still just working the rat race, So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, for close to 16 years, I was working in corporate America. I was never fulfilled. In fact, part of the reason I'm kind of thankful I went through the things I went through is because it gave me an ability to see things outside of just my own ego. Because I was very driven to succeed, very driven to keep making more money. I went to school at George Mason, got my MBA from Johns Hopkins, have all kinds of credentials to my name. And then 2008 came around, and that was my spark, where I got really involved in the Obama campaign. And then after that point, I'm still working in corporate America for a while. 2014 comes around, and I'm kind of like just fast forwarding through my life. But 2014 comes around. The contract that I was on, we lost it. So I had 30 days to find a position at Booz Allen, and didn't work out so well. So for the first couple of months, I felt the pressure to get back immediately into the corporate world. And then I made a mistake of looking at my 401k, and I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm gonna just have a good time. So I lived a life of I lived a very carefree life for almost a year, and then I decided I'm gonna open up a business. Wrong business.
Yeah.
Wrong business. Wrong people to invest with. And so I realized how quick life could unravel when you don't have a cash stream and when you go burn through your money.
Right.
So
Wow.
I literally I went from I was living in an apartment the rent was $2,100 a month in Falls Church, Virginia, and then from there I ended up leaving Virginia altogether and went to South Carolina, and I hit the pavements, not walking, sleeping.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't. You know, there's other aspects of my story that I've decided not to get too preachy about it, but I just gave it to God because there's certain things that happen, which if you try to get vindication, it just won't end well, you know.
Sure.
And plus, it would have been about my ego. So I remember at one point I was like I really got hurt in South Carolina. I had a knee infection, and I was hospitalized for like 7 days. And the only thing I had at that point was I was reading the Bible a lot. And I read this book of Jonah about he got swallowed by the whale. So, that whole, I'm not trying, but I just remember at the very end his anger. Like, why did this happen to me? And I was like, wow, that's me. I felt like why did the hell did this happen to me? You know. But then I realized within that, and with different experiences throughout that was my ego speaking, and that if I was going to become bitter and make it about me, and if I don't find a way to find redemption through this process, and make it about other people, that I was going to get sunk, because I've seen people that are sunk. When tragedies happen to all of us, and we have a choice at that point to either be thankful or to be bitter. And once you become bitter, that is a life changer. And so I chose somehow, initially, I'm not saying it wasn't hard, because I really, at some point, I ended up going to New York, and then before I moved to Colorado to go to this place called Harvest Farm. It's a community farm. I lived there for like 13 months for free. But I was also not making no money. But it was, to be honest with you, like at some point, we were getting a stipend of $7 a week. So I was a cook on the farm. I was making $7 a week. I found more joy in that than when I was making my last paycheck at Booz Allen was $99,555 a year.
Yeah.
So if you add in all the bonuses, I was over 6 figures. But for me, by the way, I say these things because the old me was pissed. Why can't they give me 6 figures? I want to be at 100, and I used to get livid about that, like livid. And I would get a pay raise of like 3%, 4%, which translates to $4,000 a year in extra money. Livid. For 2 years, I didn't make $4,000. For 2 years, I made maybe for 1 year alone, I might have made maybe $200 for the whole year.
Right.
That was my Starbucks money for a week. When I was in. But I found purpose throughout this whole thing. And really, what broke my heart is that I saw how humanity suffers. Because no matter how bad I had it, I saw people that had it so much worse than me. People that have physical illnesses, mental illnesses, people that lost their children. And I remember, like, for me, what really changed my mind about the whole black and white thing. Mm-hmm. I was staying in the Greenville Mission. And one day I woke up, there was this little girl, I believe her name was Sam. And she was quote unquote white. I always put quote unquote because it's just, I see them as so asinine. But she was a white girl, 7 years old, and she's living in a shelter. And like, I remember the first time I saw her, I cried. Mm-hmm. And like, I cursed God at that point, to be honest, initially. I was like, wow, it's one thing for me to be here because these are stupid decisions that I made, that contributed to my station in life. But why her? But then, like, I saw the other side of it, which is, you know what? how am I going to sit up here and talk about white privilege or talk about, white people are doing this? Well, she's there. And if she's there, that means throughout this nation, there's countless amounts. And that doesn't diminish my pain. Me acknowledging that a quote unquote white person is going through something does not mean that I'm not going through something. So there has to be a way to tell our stories through us, as opposed to I and you don't matter, So that's when I started to focus on the commonality of our pains, and I started writing again, and it was my writing that took me out of my depression, to be honest with you. And then things happened, and so the redemption story. I ended up meeting my fiance, and the rest was being written. So good things are happening now. It's not
that's great.
It's not like it was before, but life is still has its challenges. But I'm in a blessed place. I wouldn't trade anything, not even the hardship that I went through for the past 2 years. I wouldn't change anything about it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to think about, because I think, for all of us, I have my story's different, but it's, still my own personal, when you are become disillusioned with the system and what you've been, I was raised in it too. And then you get trapped inside of it. And sometimes it does take a pretty big event.
Yep.
And it's usually not a very happy feeling, when you find out that, like, you've been taken, they've been, right. And it does feel better to be on the other side, where at least you know that you're doing good work now, and you have a bigger awareness of what's really going on, even no matter how much money they throw at you, or how much easier I guess it is to be able to get through life just following along with what you're supposed to be doing and what everybody else is doing.
Mm. By the way, I don't mean to say this to vilify people that are working in corporate America, right? Look, the truth of it is, this broadcast is dependent on Google or Skype, and so all these MSN.
Right.
So we're all beholden to this big beast. So I'm not trying to say that. Well, if you work at a bank, that means you're an a-hole. Mm-hmm. I like to think that if we got here, if it took us forever to get to this point, it's not going to unravel in one day. It's incremental steps, and so we make small decisions. And so, I know that the Gearon Journal is dependent on Facebook, for example, to reach an audience, on Google to reach an audience, on GoDaddy, which is a corporation that's hosting that. But I like to think over time, as we take steps away from it, that there might be other alternatives. There might be a non-corporate alternative. So we work for that day. We don't, we don't try to attain perfection immediately. We just work towards perfection and hopefully perfect our nation and ourselves over time, even if we never get there within our lifetime.
Yeah, it is interesting. I read your recent article about the way that independent media is starting to get more and more censored. And even with, what do you think about this? I kind of wanted to bring this up with you because, we're in alternative media, and everybody has to kind of choose how far out they want to go. We've had this recent Florida shooting, where I think it's a testament, no matter where you fit into this, was it a false flag, was it not, whatever, people, right. But the fact that so many people are talking about it does show that a lot of people seriously distrust the mainstream media. A lot of people are starting to be like, man, maybe this didn't really happen, maybe it's all fake, know, and if enough people are thinking like that these videos are going viral on YouTube and YouTube has to take them down, that says something in and of itself without even getting into the details of it. But where do you stand right now trying to disseminate this information and, using Google and Facebook and YouTube, but watching the censorship just get more and more? Tie it back into the Russian thing. They're using the Russia thing as this excuse to shut us all down.
Actually, it's funny because I wrote about this exact topic today because there was an article that I wrote about Ethiopia and Haiti and the common link between two people that rose up and overthrew their oppressors. And so I didn't write this in black versus white. There was no hint of incendiary language. There was no hint of left-right divide. I wrote this oppressed versus the oppressor, and not in a way that is pervasive in our time. And then I I decided to buy an ad on Facebook for it, and it got rejected.
Wow.
And the rejection notice was against community standards. What community standards? Well, I've seen some of the most despicable things on Facebook. Despicable things. I mean, sexual perverted stuff. Hate speech, outright hate speech coming from Fox News and MSNBC. But that's allowed, and then something that writes about people unity, and taking on their oppressors, and not in a way that's through a racial blindness, but really from a human perspective, and it gets rejected. And so this is you said something a few seconds ago about people are questioning the narratives, except like I said, the I don't know what to call it, the establishment, the system. They're smarter than us because part of they're more cunning. I take it back because they also empower people. I don't trust, to be honest with you, I don't trust InfoWars, for example, from my perspective, because they have too much of a following and they're dependent on and so I feel as though their role is to inject skepticism and to inject conspiracy theory so that people that try to seek truth are lumped in with the rest. And so now if I say something that might be similar to what InfoWars is saying, oh, he's an InfoWars guy, Right. And so it's various, like even go back to the JFK assassination and how the CIA came up with the whole notion of conspiracy theory. Right?
Absolutely.
And so you perpetuate or you propagate all these demagogues and you give them airtime to speak nonsense. And so 1,000 liars bury the few who are telling the truth. And so it gets to be challenging because The Intercept, I thought they were corporate media, independent media. And then I realized they're shills of the DNC. They always present everything through the left-right divide, and they never criticize the Democrats. They're always going after. And I was like, so you have to be very discerning. And for me, the way I see it is this. There's two ways to separate the frauds from the real, as far as I'm concerned. Or at least, not saying people like us are truth tellers. We're just looking for truth. We don't know what truth. Nobody knows truth. But at least we're not lying, right? In our flawed ways, we're trying to find truth and wherever it may exist. But then there are people that explicitly lie by commission. And so the way to separate them, as far as I'm concerned, it used to be that I said anyone that takes corporate money. And then I said there's people that do ad spaces. So then one way is, in a way, I still stand by that, which is if you take corporate money through ad revenue, kind of red flag number one. But within that red flag, you might still be at least somewhat of a truth teller or attempting to be. But then the second one is if mainstream media gives you access, then immediately discount them as frauds because they will ignore the people that are actually attempting to be bridge builders will get silence forever, the silent treatment forever.
Right.
If they do garner enough of following, by the way, then the opposite happens. They get silenced by other means. So the people that you see on MSNBC being quoted in Washington Post, being quoted in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, frauds, every one of them, because they're there to perpetuate the status quo, not to challenge it. So I like to think that the audience, the consumers of this information, have to be discerning and say, okay, how does this jive to what's their motive behind what they're telling us? So question not only the content, but the motive of the content, the person that's providing the content as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I can't agree with you more about that either. And that the longer I do this program and the more people like you that I'm interviewing and really looking into this stuff, the more I'm really realizing that the mainstream media is devastating to the people. That it's not just that like they're bad at what they do, or they're skipping over the point. It's like you're saying they ignore the people that are actually speaking truth to power. I mean, it's like a narcissistic bully or something. They're forcing, they're passive aggressively forcing, out the people that are having real conversations that could really help people, and then they're manufacturing these conversations that have nothing to do with what's really going on, and trying to turn things into a big deal that do nothing else but divide us, so that we won't work together.
Yeah, it's sad. But again, it goes back to the monetization of news, because when you monetize it, and your objective is, okay, you have your demographic, and through these demographics, you could drive up your top and bottom revenue, and that's all you care about. And you want to. By the way, we're all subjected to this. If I start taking, okay, let me explain it this way. When I first started writing the Gear Journal, I was really writing without abandon, right? But I'm hoping, I question myself a lot. I'm very introspective. I'm hoping that the reason that I've not tamed, but I'm a lot more introspective in my writing these days, and not quite as fiery as I once was, is because I'm learning to tame my craft and to hone it, and to become less less of a rhetorical fire breather, right? And to focus more on the message of what I'm trying to say. But I wonder too sometimes, is it because I'm trying to cater towards this audience that I'm building up, right? So, and this is getting 1,000 hits a day. Imagine if I'm getting 1,000,000 hits a day. This is the corrosive power of influence, of money, and so. Right now, I'm getting a lot of support from our audience members in terms of them donating through either Patreon or through our website. I wonder if I too will be corrupted by this. So it's just hard. Sometimes I don't blame journalists for what they're doing, because this is the nature of humanity, I think. And so the way to really mitigate for this is to spread the power out as much as possible. And in the same way with, why I'm against corporatism, because corporations exist to monopolize markets and to eradicate competition. The best way to account for that is by spreading out the opportunity, and by spreading out the resources. You got to do the same thing with information as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as you say that, I'm thinking about how libertarians really are, whether you're a libertarian or you're a socialist, you're against corporations. And right. That's where the left-right paradigm really is. It doesn't function. The mainstream media tries to separate us out, but they don't actually do a good job of describing who we really are. And they're sort of forcing us into these cubby holes where we can be divided.
Right.
But I mean, like you're talking, you can be against corporations and still be for small business, and then that just transforms the left-right paradigm. You're not even talking.
Right.
I mean, that's just the thing about the mainstream media narrative, is like the narrative actually doesn't really make sense.
Except it does for them, right? Because they. By the way, this is
works for them for sure. Yeah.
This is why you'll never be invited to Fox News or MSNBC. They don't want you to say that. What you just said it makes too much sense. By the way, it's not just libertarians and socialists that believe this. I really believe that even liberals and conservatives, progressives and conservatives, it's all about the messaging. If you go to conservatives and say, "Hey, do you want more money and power to be within your community, and for small businesses to be empowered?" They'll say yes, right?
Yeah.
That same message, you go to a liberal and say, "Hey, do you want more money and resources in your community so that people can make individual choices as opposed to being dictated?" And this transcends all political spectrums.
Right.
But then if you are an a-hole and you say, "Hey, conservatives, do you think that communism," right, as you just start using these key words, then that's when they start being divided. And that's how they do it, because instead of focusing on what we all have in common, they throw out these red meat, and then red meat serves to to shatter us and to make us see each other as enemies. And really, everyone from left to right, across all political, there's a common core that we all agree on. It's not fair that we don't have enough resources and opportunities. Everyone agrees to that. And it's not fair that we're not able to pursue our rights to property and happiness. Everyone agrees to that. You know, it's not fair to be being told what to do by somebody that's by somebody else. Everyone agrees to these things. We agree. We disagree on. We agree on 80% of it. So let me just say it this way: if you look at the number of things, right? So if there's 100 issues, right, and we might disagree on 95 out of 100. That's not really 95% disagreement, because there's the 5 issues that we agree on impact the other 95. So really, we agree on the 5 root sources. Everything else is fluff, right? So they get us to focus on the fluff instead of the substance of what we all agree to.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, they're constantly focusing on the fluff, and then I think the left-right paradigm is like, I mean, I find in people that it's a bad habit. Like when I try to talk politics with people, I'm kind of trying to test the waters, and it's almost like a trigger. Like if you trigger their left-right paradigm, then they're going to jump onto their team and they're going to hate the other team. And it's like, it's so difficult to have a political conversation without doing that to people. And I even in myself, I see the old habits, you know?
Like, me too. Yeah.
It's such an ingrained habit that it's like, God, I mean, why can't I just transcend this and get along with everybody? Because like you're saying, let's find the 5 things that we do agree on and let's get that work done. And then let's see what our community looks like, you know, after that, and we can talk some more.
Yeah. But you know what, though? I like to think, so there is no such thing in life as, what was it? The Buddhists, when they enlightenment. There's no enlightenment. You can never, I don't care how old you get or how wise you are, there's still going to be so when I was in Colorado, I was working at the deli at Fikre, right? And so one day, these two, an old couple walk in together. Like, he must have been 85, maybe she's 83, right? So I looked at him, I said, oh, how beautiful is that? Right? Yeah. So at one point she walks away. I said, hey, I have a question for you. I said, sure. I said, when did it stop? When did the temptation stop for you? When did you say, this is my woman? That's it. He goes, yeah, right. I still have temptations. I was like, what? Like, it was a mind blocker, but he goes, you would never be able to tame that beast. Right? So I was so blown away by what he said. But then it made me realize, you know, the quest is not, again, it's not to be perfect. It's to work towards it. So, you know, part of the awakening or the enlightenment is we will never attain enlightenment. It's just part of it is to wake up to it and then say, okay, this is the marker. And from this point forward, I'm going to work towards what I want to get to. And I'm going to have setbacks. You know, it's like if you're working out and you want to lose 80 pounds, there might be a day you eat ice cream, might be a day that you slip up and decide to have a 6-pack or whatever. But ultimately, as long as the arc of your life is moving towards that direction. And so it's the same way with all of us, I hope, is that we say, okay, pause, stop doing damage, and then try to heal from that point forward, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope more and more people can get on this. I mean, and I hope that, I hope that with the internet and with the work of people like you, that we can continue to start creating a different kind of vision for the way that people can unify. I mean, in a lot of ways, like that article that you were talking about, writing about Africa, it was amazing to me to read it actually, because when you're talking about the history of Ethiopia, that's not what I hear. You know, what I hear is there's a bunch of tribes over there and we had to go civilize them. Right. Or, kind of the same thing with the Native Americans here. You just don't even get the actual real history. Mm-hmm. And that's why I appreciated that article, because I was getting a little bit of that and realizing that there's this whole history that, because of the way that we've been fed this what I would call colonized history.
Right.
You know, this history from the colonizer's point of view, where they're trying to pretend like they've got the best way and everybody needs to act like them, or else, we're just a bunch of uncivilized savages or something. And there's this whole history of it, and we, as truth seekers, are having to confront this history and find the truth. But then when we're talking about what's going on today, I mean, if you want to talk about 9/11 or these other major events that even, now that's almost 20 years in the past, we're creating a history, like the mainstream media is creating a false history. And you can go back, I mean, certainly they call it yellow journalism in World War I. And before that, I mean, that was all false history too. So even a lot of people are writing history books now. They're citing the New York Times from 1915, and those were lies back then,
That's how you never get to truth. By the way, it's not just Africa, right? So I remember when I first went to South Carolina, and I was like, I'm going to South Carolina. There's going to be a daggone KKK march every weekend to get myself ready for this stuff. Right? I really, seriously, like just based on media, right? Just based on what was been fed to me, what I've consumed over the years. I just assumed that everyone in South Carolina was going to be eating grits for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was going to be a KKK rally every weekend. And so, I mean, I say this with a bit of a satire, but I really was expecting some type of just straight up. I got there, Greenville, South Carolina. It was one of the most progressive, beautiful places I've ever been in my life. I saw less racism there than I did in D.C. Seriously, no joke. It's beautiful. The harmony that I'm not saying there might be other parts of South Carolina that Greenville was like a heaven on earth to me, man. It was beautiful. In fact, I thought about it for a long time about moving there, and I'm gonna, hopefully things work out in life. I'm going to actually buy a home there just because that's how beautiful it was.
Wow.
So, you depend on media. It tells you a narrative of X, and then you realize when you get there, it's not like that. And so I say this in relation to, what you thought about Africa, for example. And, I don't blame you, because this is the power of media. They're able to manipulate our minds and condition us to see things that are not there and then to act upon them, And this is how, this is how a malicious media could become. It's the most powerful weapon ever invented by mankind. It's not the atomic bomb. It's not any weapon that you could think of. It's media, information, the ability. The tongue has always been the most powerful weapon of mankind. Man, the tongue, the ability to communicate, and as technology add on top of that, the ability to manipulate information. Where if we don't find a way to break out of this corporatization of media, where 90% of the information that we consume is owned by 6 people, just breathtaking when you think about that.
Right.
And when you get to 100%, good luck. Just do the whole cross thing and kiss your booty behind, because at that point, they can really dictate a lot of things to happen. So, like I said, Ethiopians never expected 200,000 to perish and for tyranny to reign upon the country. Let's pray that doesn't happen here and work towards that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I was raised to think that Columbus discovered America, and then I was probably maybe even in my 20s, like in my late 20s before I realized how ridiculous that was, that there were millions of people who lived here. Like, what? So that shows you the power and the assumptions that everybody makes all the time about what they think is going on. And it's based on, it's funny, I always think about this because one of the few people that I know who really I'm interested in history, and I study history, but a lot of people, they don't realize how important history is, because everybody has a belief about what has happened to them and their families for the last 100 or 200 years, and if that belief is really not accurate, or if that belief was fed to them even subconsciously by this colonizing force, by this corporate media, then they're living a lie. It's important to really be able to go back through your history and know, at least get as close to the truth as you possibly can, or be truth seeking when it comes to it, and not let yourself be fooled.
Yeah. I mean, and going back to piggyback on that, this is dangerous times that we live in. Every war America's been involved in has always been through a pretext. So the Spanish-American War, it was the sinking of, I believe it was the USS Maine, Pearl Harbor for World War II, Gulf of Tonkin for Vietnam. Just the weapons of mass destruction for Iraq. Even the first Iraq War. Revisionist history makes it seem like Saddam operated in a vacuum. Saddam was, he was the best buddy with Dick Cheney and George Bush. He actually gave them a heads up that he was going to invade Kuwait. They said nothing, and so this is media. This is the media that gets us into these wars, that manufactures these wars, because there's a profit motive. CNN figured out when something goes boom in Baghdad, that means money for them.
Yeah,
so that means death for Iraqis, and it means death for our veterans. It means death for people that sign up to defend this country, only to go there and die at the hands of an IED. And by the way, these IEDs are made of bombs that were made by Boeing. I mean, yeah, you can sit there and blame the people that made the bomb, but who manufactured the bombs that were turned into IEDs? So these are the things that corporate media doesn't talk about. And so the next war that they're trying to gin up with Russia, just think that through, what that could mean. This is not a war with a bunch of people in caves anymore. This is a war that could end all of us. A missile that goes off from this direction there or the other way sets about a cascade of missiles, and then that's it. Goodbye. So, we argue about team politics when really it's team humanity that's at stake.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, we've got, we're I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes into it, so I guess we should be thinking about wrapping it up.
Sure.
I did want to ask you before you go, what is the name of Guyon? Is that a reference to Ethiopia?
Yeah, so the Guyon Journal, right? It's so the Nile River got renamed, right? We've all in Ethiopia, we still to this day call it the Abba Guyon, which is the Guyon River. Okay. And if you, not to get biblical, right? But now in the Bible, there's four rivers mentioned in the Bible, which is the Pishon, the Gihon, the Euphrates, and Tigris. So that kind of gives a significance in the Bible. But then by renaming it, it becomes nothing, right? And so this is how colonizers work. They rename people, they rename places, they rename people to possessions. That's how they when they broke slaves, by the way, remember in Roots, he said his name was Toby. So renaming is a powerful tool. The tongue is a powerful tool. So the Guyon Journal is paying homage to this truth of Ethiopia, which the Guyon River is called the Guyon River, it's not the Nile River, that some explorer from Great Britain came up with. So that became the foundation or the basis of trying to seek truth. Not saying that I own the truth, but as you dig, as you find information, to expose it and to speak against the lies of people that have monetized lies. So that's why, when I said earlier, I don't know if I like the word African American, for example, because the whole continent of Africa used to actually be called Ethiopia. And it got renamed to Africa after Scipio Africanus destroyed the entire continent and killed millions of people. So these are the lies that continue to this day. So the Guyon Journal is a journey of sorts, individual and collective. This is why I said revolutionize news. It's the news is being revolutionized hopefully by all of us questioning these things and having these conversations. That's the revolution. I'm not espousing a revolution of the bullets, but of the hearts of the mind. So that's what we're about, and that's why I call it the Guyon Journal.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. I'm glad I asked because I thought, well, I think it's about a river and I think it has to do with Ethiopia, but
Yeah.
that now it totally makes sense. So it's all coming together for me. Well, I really appreciate your writing. You're an excellent writer, and I hope more people start to read your stuff. I mean, I've really been impressed. It's not just you've got a great vocabulary and the way you put words together, and also that you bring so much of your personal experience to what you're writing about that you can just tell that you really care about trying to uplift people, and especially the message of unity above all else. I just think it's so true. I mean, like I said, I started listening to you when the racism thing, the mainstream media narrative was just promoting this. I was like, I mean, I'm not saying that racism isn't a problem or it doesn't exist, but I mean, it's not 1950 again, right? You know, can't we say that we've made some progress, and can't we, like, you can just tell when it's becoming like this fever pitch and they just brought it up and I don't, it's like, God.
But by the way, even within that, so if I go to a gas station, and I hope I don't say this to sound elitist. I think 2 years of going through hardship can make me say this without sounding elitist. Right. I've earned the right now. No.
Yeah.
No, but if a gas station attendant, for example, calls me the N-word, so he has no power over me. That's not racism. That's just ignorance and bigotry, right?
Right.
So why even me getting upset proves to him that I am, right? And I'm like, actually, no, you are, because that means ignorant, and I walk away, or even not even respond. To be honest, remember I said how the enlightenment is a process. I really should get to a point where I'm like, okay, right. But if not, at the very worst, instead of getting mad and getting vilifying the guys as racist, just say, actually, now racism is on a whole nother level. If I go to a bank and the banker says, "No, we don't take your kind," we don't. That is racism. So racism is a combination of bigotry when it's combined with the action to impede my life. So, by the way, within that same context, if I'm a boss and you're my employer and I'm like, I don't really mess with white people, in that context, I'm the racist too. Right. So now I don't say these things to diminish. There's an institutional aspect of what quote unquote black folks go through in America that still hasn't been accounted for. And to this day, I know I get treated differently because of my complexion, right? But these things cannot be addressed by vilifying other people, right? By going around. That's why I disavow things like saying, like I said, going around saying white privilege. Why? What does that diminishing what somebody else goes through? What does that solve? Having this type of conversation, Right. Well, I tell you, it's hard for me because of X, but I'm not blaming you. There's a healing process in that, and maybe at that point you create allies. But if the introductory sentences, you're privileged because you're white, and I'm hurting. It's just human nature. If somebody called me, I'm like, F you. You know what I go through in my life? So I'm hoping that we get to a point where we could discuss these things without pointing fingers and with hands of friendship being extended. And that doesn't mean that you have to silence yourself or to not say what hurts, but express your hurt without saying that other people are not going through hurt, and accept their stories as well. So I hope that's where we get to in life.
Well, I mean, I gotta say, and from my experience, actually, even that phrase "white privilege," I mean, sometimes it's pissed me off. It's like, you don't know what I've been through, and then, I mean, certainly, there's plenty of really poor white people out there that they're not feeling. Of course, it's gonna upset them.
Right. Yeah.
So why are you even like? Is this really the best way to solve the problem? It's not that there's not a problem, or it's not that things can't get better for everyone involved, and that people of color have a certain set of issues that are going to make their lives difficult because they are a minority culture inside the United States. But we have to figure out a way to be able to have a conversation about it that's healing on all levels, and not like, I don't know, like even that term white privilege. You just know that some people are going to have a bad reaction, and then there's going to be a conflict. It's already setting you up to fail if your goal is harmony.
Yeah. By the way, this is not even theory. When I was in Fort Collins, I attended I forgot who did it. there was some type of a feminist rally. I like to think I'm a feminist, to be honest. I'm in the corner of people that feel like they've been oppressed, right? I've always been for the underdog. And so there's an inner feminism in me as well. So I went to this rally. I said, yeah, I'm going to support this lady. I was like, yeah, this is actually pretty hip. And then this lady came over, this effing men. And I was like, hey, I got defensive. What the hell do you mean? I didn't do nothing to you. So choose your words wisely, because there's no need to be antagonistic and turn off. If you want to know, part of the reason why Trump was elected is because he took advantage of people that felt like they were not being paid attention to. So he became their demagogue. And so maybe parts of those people might not have ranted at Trump if they felt like they were being included in the struggle. But when they're being told that their struggle doesn't matter, they're going to find somebody that will tell them that their struggle matters.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
So I don't know. I feel like we have to get away from this top-down management of our lives and the quest for justice, and do it from the bottom, from us, from the people that are struggling, and not expect people that are thriving to save us. They don't want to. They're thriving. Why do they want the status quo to change?
Right, totally. Well, the other thing that really comes to mind, too, is that there are natural differences that people have. I mean, white American culture is different than black American culture. Right. Men are different than women. And so then what are we going to, we have a choice. Like sometimes white people are going to be uncomfortable. I mean, if you took me in Mendocino County here, where there's like one black person, right. I can even drive to Oakland and hang out in a black neighborhood for a while. I'm going to be a little bit uncomfortable because I'm just not used to it. It's not because I have like some part of me that, hates the other person or whatever. Right. There's just a little natural uncomfortability because I'm not used to it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, that's what gets exploited. Right. That's where the system, the colonial system, is going to say, we can't have these two, different communities unite against us. So we're going to exploit these natural differences, this little bit of uncomfortability, and we're going to create that and turn it into a Grand Canyon divide where they'll never get together and they'll always be fighting with each other. And that's what's frustrating to me, where I'd like to be able to say, hey, I can go in Oakland, I can be uncomfortable for a couple of weeks, and then I can make a few friends and start to realize that we're not that different, or I can go in there and, I can be listening to too much of the mainstream media, or the next thing I'm worried about getting mugged all the time, and I can freak out.
Yep. And by the way, I actually remember same thing happened to me. I was thinking, South Carolina, what's going to happen? Right. But because I chose to have an open mind, and I started, in life, your reality becomes as you choose to see it. To be honest, so if you choose to see through dirty glasses, you will see dirt everywhere. There's I was taking when I was in college, there was something that I forgot exactly what the term is, but if you buy a car and you buy a green Ford Escort, all of a sudden you get on the highway, you will see nothing but Ford green Escorts, right?
Right.
It's because something is now personal to you, that you see it everywhere. You're thinking, what? Everyone trying to be like me or whatever, right? Joke. That's because this is not the prism that you see the world through. So if the prism that you see the world through is through anger, you will find nothing but stuff that will get you pissed off at all times. So choose to put on the goggles of hope, and you'll see hopeful things. And so it's like I said, it's instead of depending on the rich and powerful to be our saviors. I wrote this recently too, but if you're in Vegas and you're on a blackjack table with 10 other people and you keep hitting 21, you don't ever bust. You just keep winning. Even when you're not hitting 21, you're winning. And everyone else at the table is losing. Who amongst us will say, hey, this dealer is not fair. I want another dealer so that it could be more equitable. No. I'm like, no, I want to keep this dude here as long as, what I'm saying? So within that realm, we're expecting people that are hitting 21 in life at all times to change the dealer for us. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
We're we're the ones that's going to have to force the dealer to change. And the only way we could do that is to unite as one people instead of clapping on as the person's getting 21 all the time and we're busting at every hand. So it's up to us to stop being a nation of a cult of personalities and demand a new dealer and a new deal. Not the type of new deal that FDR gave us, but a new deal.
Yeah, I hear you. And the only way we are going to get that is to unite together and just be able to have respect for our differences, but keep our eye on the ball, because right now it's just, I don't know. I'm glad that I'm doing this. I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. I hope that, all the people that are doing this gain more and more of a following, and somehow there's got to be a momentum that starts to turn it around. It seems interesting. I did some work up here in Mendocino County a few years ago with this community rights public banking angle, where I was hoping we were trying to turn Mendocino County into a charter county and then put in the charter that we were going to have a public bank. The county was going to own its own bank, and we were going to break away from the from the central bank system.
You live to tell about it.
Yeah, I know. It was a crazy idea, and it never got big enough to even, we weren't pissing off any of the big boys.
Right, that's why you're living now.
Yeah, right. But I think it was a solid plan, and I don't know if that's the kind of plan that can maybe start to gain momentum around the country. But there has to become some kind of more cohesive some kind of alternative political movement,
right,
that's cohesive enough that it can actually start to, I think about the populist movement in the 1880s, 1890s,
right,
something like that just comes up and says, you know what, we don't need this anymore. We can do our own thing in our own communities, and we're going to be a lot better off for it. But we'll just keep plugging away. Do you want to give people your... Well, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. The thing froze up for a second. But, I think ultimately it goes back to this. It's incrementalism. It's not going to be a one big bang. And it's something as each one of us has to make a decision each day whether or not we're going to do things that empower the community where we live, or hands over power to people that don't live amongst us. So shop locally, eat locally, grow locally as much as possible. And it doesn't have to be binary. Again, stop with the binary thinking. Just as much as you can. When you start to work out, you don't get from out of shape to in shape the next day. You start walking maybe at first if you're really out of shape. Then you start jogging, then you add more weights so incrementally you get, stronger and more vigorous as you go along. And so it's the same way. You just start with a small step and then see where it takes you. But in the back of your mind, say, okay, this is where I want to go, but let me start with this. So, just think community instead of thinking corporate. Corporation versus community, choose community, because you're choosing yourself that way.
Yeah, it sounds like a plan. All right, well, I think we better wrap it up. Looks like we're about an hour and a half in, so that's all the time we got for today. But I really appreciate you coming on the show, and thanks a lot for all the work that you're doing. I have personally enjoyed it a lot, and I hope people who listen to this check out the Guillon Journal.
Thank you.
And get more information out of it. Not just the actual factual information that you're giving, but again, your writing style I really appreciate. So I hope that you keep on spreading the word. Sure. Do you want to let people know your contact information, the other things you got going on, like Guillon Cast, your YouTube channel, and so they can find out more?
Sure. So yeah, you could check us out all the time. I try to write at least once a day, as much as I can. And we have other writers as well. Tim Newell, that's also a writer, and trying to add more people that's on the blank out on the other name for some reason. Bad editor. So we're trying to add on more people to the team. So if you want to, if you love to write, send us an email at info@guillonjournal.com. The information can be found at the website, which is www.guillonjournal.com. And you can follow us on Twitter, Gillen Journal, and I'm also on Twitter as well. And, we're pretty much everyone on social media. Let me just add this, something that I wrote about today on the Gillen Journal. Part of decentralizing is to also decentralize power from Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and use other media platforms, whether it's Minds or MeWe or and also go back to the old-fashioned way. You see an article, send out an email. The best way to defeat high-tech algorithms is to go through low-tech, and really low-tech is conversation. Talk to each other. Read something on the Gillen Journal. If you watch this interview, just say, "Have you seen this?" in person. Stop chatting and have a conversation instead. So,
right.
Go back. Maybe the revolution is the de-evolution, back to what we used to be, the root of who we are as human beings, which is a community, and stop being a bunch of corporations living together. So, check us out at any time at thegillenjournal.com. And you can also find us on social media as well. So that's a bit about us.
All right. Very good, Teodrose. Really appreciate being on the show. Just in closing, I want to remind people, if they like what they're hearing, they can support me at Patreon at patreon.com/The Shift. And if you want to find out more information about my stuff, you can go on Facebook at The Shift with Doug McKenty. Join our conversation on Twitter at DMcKenty. And the website for the show is theshiftnow.com. So you can check that out for more info. And I've got my archives up there as well. So thanks so much for being on the show, Teodrose. Totally appreciate the work that you've been doing, and keep up the good work.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate you, Doug. And like I said, keep supporting independent media. That's where it's at. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.